teacher. Hi guys. Today we will discuss a presentation about ethnic conflicts. It will define ethnic conflicts as well as discussing the factors that cause ethnic conflict. Ethnic conflict is a conflict between two or more contending ethnic groups. Let's start. Ethnic conflict, a form of conflict in which the objectives of at least one party are defined in ethnic terms, and the conflict, its antecedents, and possible solutions are perceived along ethnic lines. The conflict is usually not about ethnic differences themselves, but over political, economic, social, cultural, or territorial matters. History of ethnic conflicts. First ethnic conflict was in South Africa called apartheid in 1948 to 1994. Apartheid is racial segregation of the majority black inhabitants by minority white Afrikaners who held political power, classified as one of four racial groups. They are black, white, colored, and Indian. Apartheid, starting in 1950, forced separation of residential areas based upon race. Non-whites were excluded from most developed areas. In 1951 year, law allowed for forced deportation of black Africans into designed homelands, needed a pass to enter other areas. From 1960 to 1983, 3.5 million non-white South Africans were removed from their homes, and largest mass removals in modern history. In 1953 year, forced segregation in all public places and transportation aimed to eliminate contact between whites and other races. Resistance to apartheid, non-violent demonstrations, strikes, political action, and eventually armed resistance. Nelson Mandela was imprisoned from 1963 to 1990. Apartheid officially ends in 1994. Types of conflict. They are cultural conflict, territorial conflict, religion conflict, political conflict.
The reason for the emergence of religious wars is conflicts and the inconsistency of interests between different confessions or trends within one religion. For instance, in October last year in France there was such a conflict that it hasn't happened before. One teacher during the lesson explaining to their students about freedom of speech showed a caricature of an important prophet in Islam. Unfortunately, the picture offended of the feelings of the believers. In social networks, the teacher's action was strongly criticized. After that, he was brutally killed from the hands of a Muslim. Almost all residents of France came to the rally with different posters and inscriptions. In addition, on October 29th, a young man from Tunisia staged a massacre in a large church in Nice, Notre Dame de Nice. As a result, 3 people died. At the moment, the French president said the Muslim community must submit to the values of the Republic. Moreover, this conflict became the cause of misunderstandings between France and Turkey. The political relations became more complex and incomprehensible. Turkish president said that Macron needs to be tested for his mental health in response to recent statements by the French president in defense of a secular state, and he pledged to fight radical Islam. France recalled its ambassador to Turkey for consultations after Turkish president spoke out in address President. Macron promised that France won't reject cartoons and caricature. Exactly the same response and attitude from Ramzan Kadyrov to the president of Chechnya. So this conflict ended up like in December, the government approved a new bill on strengthening Republican principles, which, among other things, is aimed at combating radical Islamism. But the Prime Minister of France himself said that this doesn't apply to religions, especially Islam. He stressed that this bill is in order to strengthen the peace and unity of the people, and so this is no longer repeated.
Political conflict. How and where do political conflicts arise? The political causes of conflict are linked to ethno-territorial issues. It's primarily about the problem of ethnic groups creating independent territorial state formations. Most of the ethnic groups on the planet do not have their own independent nation state formations. As the economy and culture of ethnic groups develop and their ethnic self awareness grows, movements arise among them with the aim of creating an independent nation state. Such movements usually arise when an ethnos, at some point in its history, already had statehood but has subsequently lost it. Political causes of conflict also arise when a part of a group, or even an entire people, is limited or deprived of its political and personal rights and freedoms on the basis of its national identity. The division of ethnic groups into indigenous and non indigenous also generates political and legal inequalities and can therefore be a cause of ethnic conflict. An example of ethno-political conflict: the armed conflict between the Turkish government and the fighters of the Kurdistan Workers' Union, fighting for the establishment of Kurdish autonomy within Turkey, which continued from 1984 until the present day. The duration of the conflict is 31 years, and unfortunately, there are 40,000 casualties. Reasons and motives for the conflict. The aim of the courts is independence or recognition as a national autonomy. Kurdistan is an area that straddles four states: Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. It happened after World War I, namely the adoption of the Lausanne Peace Treaty of 1923, which established new borders for Turkey and confirmed the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. The occasion was a situation in which, following in the Lausanne Treaty, there were no countries left in the world that sought territorial redistribution in the Middle East. Everybody was happy with that, except for the discriminated Kurds. Moreover, they were left out because at the end of the 19th century there was a growing national movement among the Kurds, and there were even attempts at the establishment of a state. But these movements were localized and they were immediately suppressed. Why has it not been possible to resolve the conflict? As already noted, Kurdistan is located on the territory of four states. Why has a conflict not been resolved in 31 years? Is it all the fault of the Kurdistan Workers' Party nationalists? I guess no. It's most likely a clash of interests. First of all, there is no way the countries can agree, as the Kurds are demanding their own state. Secondly, their conditions are not being met, because geostrategically these lands connect transport and trade routes from the west to the east. This certainly makes Kurdistan an important economic region, which is why all the other countries do not want to give each other the advantage of owning the richest territories. Finally, the establishment of one of the four Kurdistan countries as an independent power would generate a series of mass unrest and wars, which would come about by way of a chain reaction. Of course, no one wants to let that happen, but in the near future, it's not possible to come to a compromise or any other appropriate way of solving the problem.
Ethnocultural conflicts. Cultural conflict is a type of conflict that occurs when different cultural values and beliefs clash. Broad and narrow definitions exist for the concept, both of which have been used to explain violence and crime on either a micro or macro scale. Cultural conflict in negotiations tends to occur for two main reasons. First, it's fairly common when confronting cultural differences for people to rely on stereotypes. Stereotypes are often pejorative. For example, Italians always run late, and they can lead to distorted expectations about your counterpart's behavior as well as potentially costly misinterpretations. You should never assume cultural stereotypes going into a negotiation. A second common reason for cross-cultural misunderstandings is that we tend to interpret others' behaviors, values, and beliefs through the lens of our own culture. To overcome this tendency, it's important to learn as much as you can about the other party's culture. This means not only searching the customs and behaviors of different cultures, but also by understanding why people follow these customs and exhibit these behaviors in the first place. An example of the cultural conflict can be the 2020 Dungan Kazakh ethnic clashes, or Korday conflict was an ethnic conflict between ethnic Kazakhs and ethnic Dungans in the village of Masanchi within the Korday district of Kazakhstan. At the end of the conflict, 11 people died, 185 were injured, and 47 people were arrested. It provoked damages costing around 1,700,000,000 tenge and the displacement of around 20,000 people to neighboring Kyrgyzstan. The conflict was due to a misunderstanding of the two nations. Conflicts of cultural values are difficult to resolve because the parties are convinced of the correctness of their worldview. Also, as parties to the conflict have different beliefs, cultural conflicts intensify when those differences become reflected in politics. But in order to avoid disagreements between cultural societies, we need to learn and respect others' culture.
Territorial conflict. Territorial dispute is an international dispute between two or more states over the legal belonging of a certain territory. Each of the parties claims that this territory is its property. Territorial conflicts can be caused by several reasons, like inconvenient borders, for example, seas or rivers, owning the territory in different periods of time, being interested in minerals in that area, etc. Territorial conflicts are often related to the possession of natural resources such as rivers, fertile farmland, mineral or petroleum resources. And sometimes countries may try to take over a territory which does not belong to them to gain ownership of the natural resources found within the territory. Here are some examples of territorial conflicts, and the first one is the dispute over the ownership of Kashmir between India and Pakistan, a dispute over the distribution of river flow in the river basin. It was a very big problem by the beginning of the 21st century, but since 2004, India and Pakistan have ceased hostilities in connection with a powerful earthquake in Kashmir. The second example is a dispute between Russia and China. The border is drawn along the median line of the Amur River. Any river can sometimes change its course, and this creates difficulties in defining a clear boundary. However, in 2004, the border between China and the Russian Federation was determined. Tarabarov Island and about half of Ussuri Island on the Amur River, half of Abagate Island on the Argun River passed to China. One more example is Iran and Iraq. Iraq laid claim to Iran's oil-rich regions. Border disputes led to a bloody 8-year war. This is an example of conflicts caused by minerals and fossil fuel. In total, around 500,000 Iraqi and Iranian soldiers died over the course of the war. The end of the war resulted in neither reparations nor border changes, and here we can see that territorial conflicts may easily turn into severe wars. And here we might have a question how to solve or prevent this kind of conflicts. So here we can demonstrate some ways to do that. The first one is to draw a certain borderline. In general, when two countries establish a frontier between them, one of the primary objects is to achieve stability and finality. A recent example is the border delimitation between Russia and China, which was finally settled in 2004. The second one is to lower the existing border barrier. The role of a border is to control the flow of people, goods, services, capitals, and information between states. If states agree to liberalize these flows, then the border will no longer play a large role.
The most fundamental rule of setting territorial disputes is that they should be done in accordance with international law. International law regulates relations between states, and any dispute between states should in principle be solved according to international law.
Okay, now about conclusion. There are some methods of ethnic conflict resolution. John Carroll, for example, has developed a typology of the methods of conflict resolution that have been employed by states, which he lists as indigenization, population transfer, and ethnic suicide. Also, with the increasing interest in the field of ethnic conflicts, many policy analysts and political scientists theorize its potential resolution and tracked the results of policy implementation. As such, theories often focus on which institutions are the most appropriate for addressing ethnic conflicts. Additionally, political conflict means manifestation and the results of specific interaction of two or more parties challenging each other for the distribution and the rotation of power resources, powers, and benefits. As you see, there are all our references. You can click any link and check the integrity of our information. It was the end of our video. We hope that our lesson about ethnic conflicts was useful for you students. Also, if you have questions, let us know. Thank you for your attention. Have a great day.